Thank you. It's a nice intimate group, which is very good for me being from Tasmania. I'm used to having nice small teams, so feel free to scooch in a little bit if you like, but otherwise if you want to stretch out, feel free. I also understand I'm standing between you and lunch as well, so I'll try and keep this nice and short so that nobody gets hangry by any stretch. Hello to all of you. My name's Michelle Weir. I'm the Executive Director of Global Marketing and Recruitment at the University of Tasmania. Oh, and my technology has already let me down, so luckily I've got my notes. I wanted to start today, as any good marketer, I wanted to start today with a story. Because for me, access to education is not just about an early entry program. It's not about government policy or strategy. It's really deeply personal to me. I grew up in the northern suburbs of Tasmania. This is a very traditional Moona house for those of you who know Tasmania. And I went to a public school, and it's a little bit like Frankston here in Melbourne, if you can imagine growing up in a location like this. The place I went to school had a lot of potential, but university was not the natural next step for most students there. Growing up here, higher education did not feel like it was for my family. And it was interesting to have that conversation just before about who is right to go to university. Oh, I've got my slides out of order here. Apologies. So the first part of my story is about my dad. So he was orphaned at a very young age. He left school in year 8, but he was a very talented craftsman. He could make anything with his hands. And I very distinctly remember as a child going into his workshop and he would be scratching out measurements on the floor or on a scrap piece of timber as well. And this was a skill really that no exam could ever measure by any means. He was amazing at being able to do this, even though he failed math early in life. So that was a very interesting part of my journey. My mum, in many ways, was opposite to this, a private school girl, originally from the country, sharp, practical, and a bit of a rebel. While she was more academic, she didn't go on to university straight away. She did it later in life, and it gave her the skills and confidence to build and run her own business, which she led successfully for more than 20 years, retiring just early this year. And I am happy to say her professor, I think, is in the next room. So James Vickers, if you get the chance tomorrow, do join his session, I think, in Stream B as well. She's not stopped though. In fact, in retirement, she's already enrolled in our family history course, and that's because for her, learning has no finish line. So between them, I really learned that talent and intelligence take many different forms. My dad's gifts were never going to be measured in a classroom, and my mum's later education empowered her to take risks, lead and build something lasting. Together, they showed me that an education can change the life's direction at any stage. As a young person, higher education wasn't on my radar. I was diagnosed with dyslexia in the 80s, long before students had assistive technology to help them with their learning. Back then, dyslexia wasn't well understood. There were no laptops, no text-to-speech software, no coloured overlays or audio books. Classrooms relied on copying information from blackboards and reading aloud. And if you stumbled, you were often labelled as not trying hard enough. I can really remember the sting of being asked to read aloud in class and stumbling over my words, the embarrassment, the red face, but also the determination to keep trying. Those moments taught me resilience, but they also made me realise how important it is to have education systems that recognise potential in many different ways. I also didn't go straight on to university. Instead, I started working, took on a traineeship and studied marketing at night while prioritising my career. From those night classes decades ago, I've never really stopped pursuing knowledge and growth. Just last month, I completed my master's degree, and this was my way of finishing what I had started decades ago. This is why I care so much about equity and access, because opportunity should not arrive by chance, only later in life. It should be there from the very start. Now I'm seeing a generational shift. This is my daughter, also dyslexic, and studying year 10. For her, higher education is not an if, but a what. And by the way, don't ever tell her I put a photo up of her in this session. Yeah, she's deciding between forensic psychology and law. And on the weekend, she thinks being an architect might be a fun, creative outlet. While she's striving for an ATAR, she knows there are many different paths to university, so she can focus on what brings her passion and not what will deliver the best result. This is what access looks like across generations. A father with talent not measured by exams, a mother who found education later in life, myself carving out my path through persistence, and a daughter who sees endless possibilities in education. That's why at the University of Tasmania, we believe that where you start out in life should not dictate where you end up. This is exactly why we created the school's recommendation program. Tasmania faces a serious challenge. We are, as I'm sure you all know, among the states with the lowest bachelor degree attainment. To meet the Accord target of 55% by 2050, we need a huge increase in completions. That's thousands more graduates than our system has ever produced. And this challenge starts well before university. In places like Smithton, Oatlands, St Helens and Campbelltown, higher education often feels far away, both geographically and culturally. In some of these communities, only a handful of students achieve their ATAR. Imagine the potential we lose if that remains the only way we measured success for entry into our bachelor programs. The scale of this challenge is clear when we look across the states. Here in Victoria, more than half of the Year 12 students achieve an ATAR. In Tasmania, it's less than a third. That gap matters because it shows how many of our students never get the chance to be considered through our traditional admissions processes. If we're aiming for 55% by 2050, our system needed to change to bring national coordinated approach to alternative undergraduate pathways. Adding to these challenges in Tasmania, our Year 12 cohort itself has been shrinking. You can see the long-term trend here from 2017 to 2023. The potential Year 12 population has been declining, and alongside it, the number of students completing the Tasmanian Certificate of Education or achieving their ATAR. There's a small rebound in the most recent year that you can see, but even with that, the overall number of students of qualifications and their ATAR is continuing to decline. So unless we changed to make our university more accessible, we would lose too many capable students. In 2023, for example, out of a potential Year 12 population of nearly 6,500, only 2,000 achieved an ATAR. That's less than 1 in 3. This means thousands of capable young Tasmanians are never considered through traditional university admission systems. And if we kept relying on an ATAR alone, we knew we would continue to lose far too many students before they even had a chance to show what they could do. That is why, even before COVID, the University of Tasmania had started designing a different way. We could see the need for a pathway to bachelor level study that recognised students' abilities more broadly, particularly for those in rural and regional communities where ATAR rates are often the lowest. There are many great examples of early entry programs around the country, but for us, the school's recommendation program was our answer. Launched in 2020, and while it had been in development for some time, the pandemic really made this urgent. Students were learning from home, often with patchy internet, limited technology, and uneven school support. And the pressure on them was immense. We had to act quickly to make sure our Year 12 still had a way forward through this time. Instead of relying only on ATAR, our program asks teachers to assess their students against 7 learner attributes. These were developed through research. Our Peter Underwood Centre asked the question of what really predicts success at university. Their research revealed the attributes that indicate stronger predictors of success in first-year university than exams alone. Attributes like time management, a skill that allows a nursing student to survive a 5 a.m. clinical placement and still submit their assessments on time. Collaboration, the ability to work as part of a group on projects, something nearly every profession demands. Engagement and independence, the spark that shows a student will take responsibility for their learning. Along with literacy, numeracy, and critical thinking, these are qualities that best predict whether a student will thrive at university. The research gave us confidence to build a program that widened the doorway but without lowering the bar. It's really working for us. Students tell us the program is reducing their stress, helping them focus on their studies and providing opportunities they thought may never have been in reach. The feedback from across our state has been powerful. One student, Alira, pictured here, told us that the school's recommendation program is honestly such a lifesaver. It's a foot in the door to university. But it's more than just a foot in the door. It's a turning point in their lives and our communities. Take Hannah. She's from the Northwest Coast, became the first student in her school's history to be offered a university place. The day her offer arrived, the teachers celebrated as much as her family. They told us that younger students were looking and asking how they could do the same thing. Hannah is looking to study teaching, and she said she wants to go back and work in her hometown. Imagine the impact on her community if the very first graduate goes back and teaches their next generation. And then there's Liam from a small town in the Huon Valley. When he started year 11, he wasn't considering university. He was following a trade path, just like his dad, and he chose subjects to suit this pathway. As well as his Certificate 1 in construction, Liam picked up a couple of level 2 subjects in graphic design, which really sparked his interest in learning. His teachers then began talking to him about university. While he did pick up level 3 subjects in year 12, he already knew he wasn't going to achieve an ATAR. Oops. So without the option of the program, he may never have applied, and he may completely have discounted university. When the offer came, he said his parents cried. Not just because Liam had a future at university, but because no one in their family had ever been before. And they knew that that meant that every generation to come after him could strive for the same thing. Finally, Sophia from the East Coast. Sophia loved life in St. Helens, particularly the water and marine environment, and always pictured herself working on or by the ocean. She worked hard at school, but it didn't come easy to her. This really impacted her confidence, and she convinced herself that university and a career in marine science might just be too hard. Through the program, her teachers recommended her based on her strengths, not just the results of her end-of-year exams. Her critical thinking, her curiosity, her engagement with learning. She's now thriving in her degree. She says the program gave her the courage to apply, the confidence to believe that she belonged at university. These are just 3 students, but their stories are being repeated all over Tasmania. First in family, first in school, students who thought the door was closed, but they've found another way. It's not just reducing their stress, it really is changing their lives, and in some cases, changing the expectations of whole communities. After just 5 years, the school's recommendation program has become the main entry pathway for our Tasmanian Year 12s into the University of Tasmania. More than 90% now come to us through the program. That's almost every Year 12 student in the state choosing this program by entry over their ATAR. Our capture rate has grown from 37% of our Tasmanian Year 12 population in 2019 to over 43% today. That rise might sound a little small, but it represents hundreds more Tasmanians choosing to say yes to university. And they are doing this even though our overall Year 12 cohort is shrinking. It's not just uptake, it's a cultural shift in education for us in Tasmania. Even more importantly, the program has doubled the number of students with no ATAR or low ATAR to go on to university, from just 5% of our enrolment in 2019 to over 10% today. What this means is hundreds of young people, many from rural and remote parts of Tasmania, are now walking onto our campuses for the very first time. We know these students are far more likely to be from equity groups. And when one student in a family goes to university, it lifts the expectations of their brothers, sisters, cousins, and even their own future children and future students, of course. It's not just about access, it's about generational change. It's not just the students, though. Teachers are seeing the value of the program. Teachers tell us it gives them the chance to back the students they know will thrive. One teacher told me, "I taught this student for years. Her results didn't reflect her ability. Exams caused her anxiety, but I knew she would succeed with the right support. The program gave me the chance to recommend her, and now she is excelling." Teachers know their students better than anyone, and better than any single exam score ever could. For years, some told us they felt powerless, watching talented, hardworking students miss out. The program has given them a way to make their professional judgment count. Of course, it's very natural for some teachers to ask, if we open the door wider, will our standards at university fall? This is why we monitor our outcomes really carefully. What we see is really clear. Having 5 years of data is really helpful. These students succeed at the same rate as our HI entry students. We have widened the doorway, but we have not lowered the bar. It's natural for teachers to worry when we change the rules, but the evidence is really clear to us. Standards are holding, and our classrooms are richer for the diversity. In fact, our academics are finding that these students often bring higher resilience, practical skills, and different perspectives that enrich their classroom. The data tells us the outcomes are strong, and the lived experience tells us that diverse classrooms benefit all learners. Behind every one of these percentage points are real students, just like Hannah, Liam, and Sophia. These students are not just getting into university, but they are thriving here. Their performance matches their peers, and their perspectives they bring, resilience, creativity, and different life experiences, are really enriching the learning environment for everyone. This isn't just about early offers or enrolments for us. It's about shifting the culture of our communities and reaching into every corner of our state. Yes, we have widened the doorway, but I believe we haven't lowered the bar. This problem, though, is of course bigger than Tasmania. This big Accord goal of 55% attainment by 2050 is not about making universities bigger or more profitable. It's about ensuring that Australia has the skills and knowledge to thrive, putting teachers into our classrooms, nurses and allied health professionals in our hospitals, and creating the engineers who will build our future industries. Tasmania does show it's possible. Our small story proves that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. We have thousands of brilliant young people able to thrive at university, and their communities desperately need them too. We have learnt 3 things from our program. First, trusting teacher judgment. No one knows students better than their teachers. Second, value broader learning attributes. Skills like critical thinking, collaboration, time management, and engagement are better predictors of success than exams alone. Third, build equity pathways that reflect their community needs. Regional, rural, and first-in-family students deserve admission systems that really do work for them. My story began in a suburb where university was not even on the radar. Someone believed in me, and I was given the chance to thrive. And for me, that really did change everything. Some people ask me why I choose to work in a sector that is often not very liked, facing headwinds from all different directions. The answer is really simple for me. What fills me with pride is knowing that in Tasmania today, thousands of young people who might once have been overlooked for university now have options, and the ripple effect of that will last for generations. I stand here as a proud Tasmanian who was given the opportunity, and now I get to provide opportunity through my work. I am the university. Our students are the university, and together we are proof that where you start out in life should not predict where you end up. Thank you.
Michelle, I love that presentation. That was to so bravely and openly share your story as well as and then roll into how that related to the program and the change it could make was really powerful, I thought. Often in universities, it's all about the money.
Yes.
Has it been a challenge to sustain the program, given that it can sometimes cost more to support these students?
Absolutely. I mean, I think as head of our recruitment and engagement function, as well as our marketing function, I get that more than anyone. Being accountable for our commencing load is quite a challenge in this environment at the moment. And of course, not just the teachers in the schools, but our academics were a little sceptical at first as well, because it does take more to teach students who need a little bit more support. We do have a university college program that provides additional support for these students, and we're already designing a bit of a fat first year or a wraparound program to ensure that they do have
Did you
those.
say fat first year?
We're calling it a fat first year.
Cool
So
as.
just a really
Great
well supported first year to be able to just inject those things that students need from the side, and every student is a little different. But that does cost more, and we certainly know that in Tasmania, because our students do cost us a little more when you look at that compared to the country as well. But we do have a really strong mission as the only university on the island. I think personally, I think the university balances that mission and the finances really effectively. We're all facing financial challenges right now, but we are still balancing that mission really nicely.
Now, just do raise your hand if you've got any questions. Over here, Anastasia.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for that story. You just answered most of my questions there, so that's fantastic. My third one, though. So how closely are you working with schools, this program, and what does that look like? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, of course. I think as well, Tasmania has many advantages, and I am a little biased, I must admit, being Tasmanian, but we are working very closely with our schools. We have a team that are in our schools all of the time. When we first started this program, we actually sent people out to the schools to support teachers actually filling in these rubrics and sending them back. It was a very manual process to start with, because we got the program to start really fast during COVID. But what we do now is more systemized. So the students apply, we load up the rubrics, the teachers fill them out and load them back to the system. And that's a fairly automated process for us. And we do rounds of offers. So if a student's really fast off the mark and they get their rubric back in time, they'll get a first round offer, and then we just continue offer rounds until they're complete. We do in some of our schools, so a lot of our high schools in Tasmania have extended to year 11 and 12 now, because in rural and remote areas, they're trying to retain students. We talked about that a little before, retaining students from 16 now to 18. So we've got extension schools all across our state, which does increase the number of schools you need to be in, of course, as well. They're the ones who need a little bit more support because they've not sent a student to university before. So we send our team out to be able to support them. And that's why we do it in rounds, just so that we can even out our workload. Now, when you look at that, of course, on a national scale, how do we do that nationally? I don't necessarily have the answer to do that today, but I would love to see some coordination across the sector to be able to bring these programs together and try and bring a system to it for students, so that it's as well understood, I guess, as the ATAR and another way for students to get into university, so that we don't all have very separate programs.
Yes, maybe over wherever the microphone goes.
Hi, Michelle. My name's Tim. I'm from ACU. Thank you so much for taking us through this. It really resonates with me, having grown up in Tasmania and then gone to a very small rural New South Wales high school. And I know firsthand how many people's lives would have been changed for the better if such a system had been available when I was of school age. My question is, having gone through this for a number of years now, what are perhaps the biggest surprises or the biggest lessons that you've taken away from the development of this program that you would advise other universities to consider in their own programs so that we can maximise effectiveness for all students going forward?
Great question. I think in the early days, there was probably a belief that we were trying to replace the ATAR system. Our Vice-Chancellor was quite critical of ATAR and how it was calculated and utilised. I think we've moved on from that to it needs to be a together system. It's not one approach that suits all students. So that's probably the first thing that we learnt, is we're not planning or trying to replace a system that is good for some aspects of entry into education, but we need to be able to make a system that identifies potential. And we did talk in the panel just before, we talked about, is university for everyone? The Accord targets are quite lofty, and we need to understand, we need to make sure that we're supporting those students into the university as well. So those attributes that came through the research were a really important aspect. And as far as I can see, and I don't, of course, know everybody's program intimately, as far as I can see, a lot of the other programs are focused more on the early entry, maybe year 11 results, or maybe a combination of year 11 results and teacher recommendations. These attributes are actually part of, I think, what sets students up to succeed and thrive, because they have those already showing through their schooling. And we're hearing lots of different stories. Students who have a parent pass away during their college years, they were on a really high ATAR pathway and then something knocked them and it meant that they couldn't achieve that result, but they can still go on and continue that path without having to drop into a pathway program that they would probably get bored in really quickly and then want to leave university as well. So a little bit of mixed learnings, I guess, through that. But the research, the attributes that were well understood, I think is a really core part of it, and not trying to replace the traditional program, but extending to be able to widen that opportunity for students.
Great.
Hi. Am I on?
Yes. Yep.
Hi, I'm Christine from QUT. Thank you for this presentation. It was really fantastic and really resonated. I've just got a question about one of the earlier slides where you were talking about the cohort shrinking in line with the application going down as well, attending university. It was one of the very early slides, yeah, this one. And it probably has a very obvious answer given the success of the program that you've got running. But I was really interested to know whether there was any sort of other circumstances that you were seeing why people were dropping in sitting for ATAR or applying for university. You know, we've got a lot of universities in Queensland. We're all competing for the same audiences, and we're seeing that shrink in cohort, maybe not so much in applications, but certainly a shrinkage in the cohort. So I'm really just interested to know if there was anything else behind it.
Yeah, I've got a colleague in the room, Lam, at the moment. So when we get lunch very soon, Lam's just sitting in the middle in front of you. Raise your hand, Lam. I encourage you to have a chat because Lam sits in the middle of our marketing team where our market research element sits as well. So he's very well versed in some of these stats. But what we're seeing is within Tasmania, and I'm sure similar across the country, is high employment. There were lots of shifts in, and dare I say in this environment, consumer behaviour. I know I'm not normally allowed to say that, but
Totally allowed.
great. The consumer behaviour has been super interesting to watch post-COVID, and we're not really post-COVID. We're kind of living with COVID, if you like. There's not one answer, I think, is probably where I'm going with this, but one was employment being high, people following their passions, of course, coming back to university a little bit later, the stress as well of either living through the COVID years as students meant that more students were taking breaks or gap years and things like that. We've seen quite a bit of that happen, but for us as well, trades were going through the roof, so that kind of productivity in those industries increasing as well. So I think there's probably a mixed reasons for that. Our population is declining as well in Tasmania, so we face lots of different headwinds, and I think Queensland has seen similar kind of mixes within their population growth as well. So yeah, lots of different reasons, but mostly seeing students choose employment over education in many respects.
I'll just jump in with another question. Last year, at last year's conference, Rufus, the Vice Chancellor, came and did an amazing speech. But one of the things that really stuck with me at the time was him describing, I think it's 20% of the top STEM students perhaps are sort of poached by Victorian universities, and he's saying, let them stay in Tasmania.
Yeah.
What's your risk that you're creating, you know, you're going to miss that cohort and you're creating a university for lower achieving students ultimately?
Yeah, it's a really great question. We lose on average around 21% of our student population off island to go to university. I don't have a stat in my mind, and I'm not sure whether it's even tracked, but so many of those come back to the island. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that they go off island to study if that's what they want to do. I think what is important is opportunity. So they need the opportunity to be able to study on their island in the courses that they want to study. That's, of course, really challenging for us. We're the only university on the island. We're in 3 of our major regional areas. So spreading a university across that is quite an expensive model to undertake. But being able to provide opportunity for those students, the students who go off island are usually choosing things that we just can't offer in Tasmania, or choosing to do it for a different purpose. They want to get off the islands, they want to fly away from their families as far as they can go, and they want to get that experience. But so often they bounce back, and usually when they've got young families as well. And so then they want to raise that next generation of people coming through Tasmania. So they ultimately return and contribute to a thriving island and a thriving community, which is the aim, I guess.
We also heard in the last session about the importance of lifelong learning. How do you sell that message to this cohort that are just clinging on to the idea of maybe getting into university once, let alone, do you just not tell them?
Tell them about lifelong learning.
Lifelong learning as a thing.
Yeah, I think I talk to Rufus a lot about just getting them on the bottom rung. And once they're on the bottom rung, they start to understand and they start to unlock knowledge and they start to apply that in their lives. And we know through our market research, we also know that those who have qualifications are more likely to come back for further qualifications as well. So I think we focus on that bottom rung and we focus on giving them the confidence to thrive in university. And then quite naturally, they then go on to the lifelong learning journey. I mean, for myself, I guess my story is very similar to that. I didn't want to go to university. Study wasn't for me. Being dyslexic in the 80s was a nightmare, and I just couldn't think of anything worse. But I multitasked with working and studying, and I've never really stopped. And when I finished my last unit of my MBA just recently, it's taken me a little while to actually come to terms with that, because I feel like I've been studying forever and it's like, what happens next? So yeah, I think we get them on the bottom rung and then we encourage them to thrive, give them those skills, and then quite naturally they go on to education. And the future of education is going to be really interesting as well. It's not just going to be coming back to our universities, it's educating themselves in so many things through our digital platforms and through other ways of learning, through AI and all sorts of really interesting things. So learning is not just about coming to university, but it's just about that hunger for more knowledge.
Was there any other questions? I don't want to hog the, yes. Oh, here you go.
I'll steal that from you. Hi, Michelle. We know each other.
Hello.
Open Universities Australia. It's really interesting, the slide you had around not lowering the bar. And my question's really around that stakeholder management, because there are those in the schools who really hold on very tightly to prestige of program and only wanting to teach the best and the brightest, and not always associating those without an ATAR as the best and the brightest. So really interested in that journey you've gone on to bring others on that journey of how we talk to and think of those who aren't the traditional learner cohort.
We're still on that journey. Not only teachers in schools, but academics in our own classrooms as well. Really hold on to, I guess, the traditional methods of admission, maybe their own memories of going to university as well and their experiences. I think it's going to be a journey, you know, for quite some time, and possibly even until these students are teaching in these classrooms maybe. So I think it's a journey we're still on. We're probably reaching a tipping point now with majority of students actually really encouraging their students into these programs, but then also being able to balance those conversations, because we don't want to stop students from following their passion. If that's Monash and leaving the island, by all means, they should have that as an opportunity as well. But they need to be able to balance that with all of their opportunities. So I think as long as we're getting that balanced conversation in the classroom, that's what's important to us. It's not just being an advocate for our program, but it's providing students with all of the difference. And I think when I first started in universities, and I don't come from higher education, from a career perspective, I've only been here for 8 years, which is a toddler by many of my colleagues' standards. But it's been quite interesting to see how that's kind of changed, I guess, and how that has actually evolved within the higher education sector. So.
Oh, yes, one more question over there. Lucky last.
Thanks, Michelle. Loved that. My name's Sheena Sudra. I work at Key Path Education. I was really interested in just this program. I'm super impressed. It's very impressive to actually be able to build a program to actually address that graph. That's incredible. The other flip side of that from an acquisition perspective is on the retention side. So I'm interested to understand what learnings you're getting from the cohorts that you're attracting and how you go about supporting them and what differences and nuances you have to put in place to support those students.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And that's part of the reason why we're designing a bit more of a FAT first year, because we're learning from those students who aren't actually completing. And we saw in one of my graphs that there are still students who aren't completing their degrees, and we need to be able to support them. And there's many reasons for that, of course, some of them that you can't actually prevent or support through that, but there's many who we can. And like many universities, I'm sure we're starting to bring in systems that give us flags for how students are engaging and how they're coping. And we've learned a lot from that. And we're taking those learnings and that research over a period of time into building the support programs around extending the supports for our first year students to be able to carry them through to second year, where they can then move on from there. So there's lots and lots of learnings that we've had.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
When we were planning the program, this was one of the topics that we were really keen to bring to you, because Michelle's team has done some really valuable work. And given where the Accord is going, and given we don't yet know what pot of gold is there for needs-based funding, it's a major topic for Australia. And so it's really interesting to share what you've got there. And I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about this going forwards.